today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about
what can you do if you're experiencing overwhelm or relational burnout. Denial builds into social withdrawal, complete social withdrawal. So we're not just distancing now, we are withdrawing. As you start putting more and more energy into pushing them or yourself, the next step is you find that you're neglecting aspects of your personal care. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship. Today we're talking about moving to a relationship that works or recovering from relationship overwhelm or burnout. And this is really the 12 steps of relationship burnout or overwhelm part 2. You don't have to have listened to the last episode to participate in this one, but it's helpful. And so you might want to go back and listen to it. A summary of the last episode is we all experience overwhelm and burnout in our relationship. Sometimes we experience overwhelm and burnout in other areas of our life and transpose it onto our relationship. Either way, we need to understand where we are in that sense of overwhelm or burnout to do something about it. And so let's quickly review the 12 stages and then let's talk about what can we do? How can we shift how we're feeling so that we act differently and generate a more loving, productive, joyful, and prosperous marriage. There are 12 stages of overwhelm. The first is excessive ambition, or really what we said in the last episode is excessive expectation. You expect more from your partner and the relationship than is realistic given your circumstances. 2 is, as a result of that excessive expectation, you start pushing. You're either pushing yourself or pushing them. And the result is frustration. As you start putting more and more energy into pushing them or yourself, the next step is you find that you're neglecting aspects of your personal care, whatever that looks like for you right now. We talked about physical, mental being intellectual and emotional, spiritual, and what am I missing? Spiritual, mental, emotional, intellectual, and also there's that part of self-care is feeling nurtured. When that happens, things really go to crap. And once we stop taking care of ourselves, then we go into a lower form of denial. Let's call it displacement of conflict. So we're experiencing inner conflict because maybe we're putting on a little weight or we're not getting our needs met, but we say this is short term. Other people have it worse than me. And that builds into social distancing and not completely cut off from our family and social groups, but we get a little distance from them because those people are going to comment on, hey, you don't look right. Something's not right with you. So we put a little space between them. And that social distancing supports our sense of denial. We go into denial about our part, our responsibility, where we're dropping the ball, and we go into blame. We blame our partner. We blame others. Denial is very insidious. Denial builds into social withdrawal, complete social withdrawal. So we're not just distancing now, we are withdrawing. We are withdrawing emotionally. We are physically isolating ourselves from others. We're probably slipping massively into parallel lives in our relationship because when we're around other people or when we're connected in our relationship, that starts to challenge our denial and our displacement or conflict. And withdrawal and not looking at where we are causal leads to odd behaviors like irritability, frustration, mood swings. And when that happens, when we're living in that world of frustration and mood swings, we are avoiding our core emotions and we become very depersonalized. Our core emotions, I'll give you an education on that another day, but in a nutshell, if we can't access our own sense of vulnerability, then we don't connect with other people and we don't experience joy and happiness. And our depersonalization leads to a very limited emotional range. 10 is, as a result of all this, we feel empty and hollow, and we might try and fill that hole through unhealthy means. 11 is, this has been going on for a while. No matter what we do, we can't fill that hole. We start getting depressed. Depression, I'm not just talking about sadness here. Depression is like having trouble getting out of bed, having trouble functioning, just general disconnection. And that leads to the 12th stage, which is total burnout and overwhelm. It might be emotional and physical collapse. It's extreme dysfunction. It's basically the end of the relationship. It might be the end of the relationship forever. And really, what it is, since we don't really end relationships, we transform them. It means we're going to either transform that relationship into a different kind of partnership where we're living separately, divorce, or we're going to transform that relationship into something that's viable and works. But we need to start with ourselves inevitably. So let's talk about stage by stage what you can do. And so the trick here is to identify where you are and take some notes on how to apply these tools. It is not to note where your partner is and tell them how to live. I want to be really clear. This is for you. Stage one is excessive expectation, ambition. Last episode, we asked you to take an expectation inventory. It was their name, the expectation that you have of them. We asked you to write on a scale from 0 to 10 how much that's being fulfilled or not, 10 being totally fulfilled, 0 being not at all. And we asked you to write down what feelings that's bringing up for you. It was really just an opportunity to air out what's been going on for you. This is a great tool for this stage right here, but it's really a great tool for any of these stages because these stages build on each other. And at the heart of any of these stages is unrealistic, unmet expectations, unreleased emotions that need to be released, limiting beliefs that need to be restructured, strategies that aren't working. That's all part of this stage. At the most basic level, even if you haven't done the inventory, we're suggesting that you sit down with your partner, start airing it out. Hey, you know what? I have been expecting a lot of you, and I'm sorry. I know that you have your hands full with work. I know that you have your hands full with the children. I know that you have your hands full with the loss of a parent, whatever's going on for them. But inevitably, when our expectations exceed what our partner can give, it's usually not because we are massively unreasonable. It's because there was a norm that was set and something has changed that makes that norm unattainable at this time. So what we're suggesting to you is air out your expectation, make an amend, make an effort to be there for them. Because guess what? They're experiencing the same thing. Do you need outside help in this situation? It really depends on how knotted up you are about it. But for most people at this stage, this is a DIY project. If you're having if you're finding that your expectation is something that they just can't give and you can't let go of it, that would be, you know what, go to Rich in Relationship, schedule a call with me now. We'll talk about it. Step two, what comes out of unmet expectations inevitably is demands or pushing yourself or them. You overextend yourself, you demand things of them. It comes across as very critical, both internally and externally. And the amended behavior is first to just recognize that you're being a little pushy and demanding, that you're, what this will often be accompanied by a critical voice, either internally or being expressed. First is to acknowledge that that's happening. Second would be to, again, pause, just pause and take a look at what's the source of this demand, and then go back to what we suggested in the stage one, sit down and talk about the source. You want to amend the behavior. It may involve getting in touch with your inner critic. It might be that you have a very critical voice that you learned from one of your parents. We've helped a lot of people at Rich in Relationship with this. It might be that you're not as strong a communicator as you would like to be. We all have a tendency to speak in terms of, you did this and made me feel that, instead of seeing how we're causal. And you may want to reach out for help with that kind of communication if you just can't seem to get past it. Stage three, personal neglect. What comes out of unmet expectations, criticism, and demands is we get so overwhelmed that we just start cutting off things that we need to do for ourselves. It might be as simple as not doing the things that feel nurturing. Maybe feeling nurturing is letting yourself sleep in once a week, or it might be taking a bath, or whatever feels nurturing to you. It might be that you're not exercising as much as you used to, or maybe you need to start exercising more. It might be about food, and maybe you have a little food addiction happening, which is something that can happen in a later stage. But whatever it is, I mentioned in the other episode, during the pandemic, the big lesson for my clients was if they wanted to show up in the pandemic with resilience, they needed to take care of themselves first. So the obvious amended action is prioritize self-care first. That might mean getting up earlier. It might mean pushing things later, but you need to make that first. Or it might look like getting out your calendar for the week every Saturday or Sunday or Monday morning and blocking out time for self-care and treating those blocks of time as boulders that are very hard to move. If something comes up, an emergency or something, and you need to move them, you move them, but you don't not do them and never come back to them unless it's just way out of bounds emergency. And so it's about really reprioritizing self-care. And again, the actions that we recommended in the first two steps are going to help you with this also because they're part of what's driving the personal neglect. We don't just go to personal neglect. We go there when our expectations aren't being met and we become very critical of others and ourselves. And as a result, we feel stressed, we're doing too much, and things get out of whack and our priorities get out of whack and our self-care just starts dropping off. All right, if you haven't taken care of personal neglect, that leads to stage 4, which is displacement of conflict. It's like low-level denial. Displacement of conflict is you avoid addressing real relationship issues. You rationalize them as this will pass. We don't really need to talk about it. This period of time where I feel like I'm doing everything and they're doing nothing, it'll pass. Or this period of time where I feel like I do so much and they do so little, my needs aren't being met, it'll pass. It'll be okay. And displacement of conflict is super unhealthy. The only strength of it is it might be keeping you from being critical, right? When we have displacement of conflict and we avoid addressing it, maybe we just stop being critical on the outside. The inner voice might still be going on. Very important to maybe take a day to yourself if you can, or maybe go for a walk in the woods, go someplace where your battery gets charged. It's part of self-care. And identify, what have I been avoiding? Have a calm conversation first with yourself about what's going on here that I'm just not talking about. And then maybe go for a walk with your partner. What is it that we aren't facing that we need to face? What are the underlying problems? And at this point, you should seriously consider seeing someone who's an expert in couples work. This conversation may be very difficult to have if you've both got some stuff. It may be triggering, right? The reason why we displace conflict is we are avoiding being triggered for the sake of keeping the peace. And we do that because we haven't yet got the tools that we need to air things out without it becoming explosive. And if you haven't handled this, the next stage is social distance. So once we have a low level of denial, that avoidance, we're going to avoid our network of support. We probably avoid our partner. We will avoid our family and friends, our community, but not completely. All right. We'll just go into an outer orbit. An outer orbit is like social distancing. It's not completely cut off. And we do that because when we see them, they say things like, is everything okay? You don't look right. You've put on a little weight. Or, our real friends will tell us directly what they see. And instead, we find ourselves hanging out with people who have an unconscious agreement with us to support us in acting as if everything's okay when it's not. How you doing? Fine. How you doing? Fine, even when it's not. Social distancing is removing ourselves from true friends and true partners and true supporters, and then associating with people who will support us in our BS, basically. The obvious next step is to make an effort to reconnect socially, make a commitment to reconnect first with the most influential person in your life. If this is your partner and you just are concerned about how to do that, maybe your best friend, maybe your pastor or rabbi or whoever you have in your life that is a counselor, and you can count on to be honest with you and have regular contact with them so that they can help you to see the areas that most need to be addressed. That's going to be usually in the earlier four stages. There's going to be things that you need to, probably all of the earlier four stages. There's things you're going to need to amend. And if you don't have someone like that, again, please feel free to go to my website, richinrelationship.com, and grab a complimentary call with me. I'm happy to talk you through this. If you haven't addressed this one, you remember these stages build. Five leads to stage six, which is hardcore denial. And that is where you just absolutely blame your partner for everything and refuse to accept any responsibility. Hardcore denial really requires a bottom of some kind. Typically, your partner will give you and if you don't take care of this, I'm leaving kind of thing. Or maybe you will experience such a deep sense of loneliness and despair that you realize that you have been blaming everyone and not being accountable for your own choices and for your own causality in this situation. Amended actions are you definitely want to reach out for help when you're in denial again. You want to reflect on your role in the relationship dynamic. You want to take responsibility for your actions, even if you see them as a response to something the other person's done. You want to take responsibility for the responses that were hurtful to them, that were attacks to them, that were painful to them, right? Because in a loving partnership, when someone flings mud at us, we take it off and we say, hey, that wasn't fun. What did you do that for? I love you. Why would you do that? But when we're in this stage, typically what we do is we take the mud off, throw it back at them, and find some poop to throw at them too, right? So we want to take responsibility for when we throw mud back, for when we throw poop at them, even if they are being assholes. We need to clean up our side of the street first. Denial leads to withdrawal, right? When we're complete withdrawal. So before we were isolating a little, we were in an outer orbit. Now we are disconnected. We are disconnected from our partner. We are disconnected from our social circles. We are disconnected from our friends. We have very little contact with anyone. Maybe we're going to work, but those relationships are superficial. We are emotionally and or physically withdrawn, creating isolation within the relationship. And the first thing you need to do is acknowledge that this is going on. Go to your partner and say, hey, I have completely withdrawn. I don't know how to reconnect, but I'm reaching out to you because I know we need to reconnect. We have this beautiful family. At my heart, I love you so much. There has to be a way to make this work. If there has been infidelity on either side, this is an opportunity to heal it. If there has been financial infidelity, emotional infidelity, or even physical infidelity, you probably need to get some outside help with this. I wouldn't try and fix this yourself. And I've helped tons of people at this stage. This is typically when people reach out to me is when they're in stage seven. Stage eight, if you don't address stage seven, it leads to stage eight, which is you become irritable, easily frustrated, experience mood swings. You're very easily triggered. So are they, maybe. Again, I do get a lot of people who come to me in this stage. They're just like, I want the relationship to work. I'm so done. They're such anuses. And these, like, from here on out, by the way, the answer is pretty much you need to get some professional help. you're not going to be able, odd behaviors happen because we're disconnected socially and we're disconnected from our partner. So our behaviors are typically things that are the boundaries are set within a social context. And so when we're not connected to a social context, our behaviors can be what makes them odd is they're not socially linked. They're outside of social norms or outside of relational norms. Behaviors leads to depersonalization. This is where you are emotionally cut off. There are basically 7 basic emotional states, and they build on each other like a pyramid. The base of all emotional joy and happiness, believe it or not, is being able to be in touch with, being vulnerable enough to be aware of sadness, hurt, and fear. And when we're disconnected from that, our emotional range, when we can't be vulnerable enough to experience our own sadness, hurt, and fear, it's very hard to empathize with other people and connect with them. And when we can't connect, we lose our capacity for happiness and joy because we are social beings. And when we're disconnected socially, uh, our emotional range becomes very limited. We become very cold. And you might find that you or your partner, if they're in this state, are turning to outside activities or even drugs or alcohol to fill that void. There's a tendency to treat everyone like they're tools or objects because you're so disconnected and depersonalized. And you really might need a 12-step program or a therapist at this stage. This is very, very damaged, and it leads to inner emptiness. Inner emptiness, for sure. People are trying to stimulate that with drugs, alcohol, addictive behavior, and then last but not not last, next is depression. From there, we slip into just being depressed all the time. The connection between addiction and depression is very hardcore. Some people can slip into depression without the addictive behavior, and depression leads to burnout and overwhelm. Now, these last 3 stages, inner emptiness, depression, and burnout, you've got to get professional help. Someone who understands addiction, someone who has an understanding of depression, and not only is going to medicate it, but is going to help you to let go of the emotional baggage. And at level 12, someone who's going to help you to recognize that what you've been doing in your relationship and probably in other aspects of your life just hasn't been working. You've got to declare it dead and start fresh. Start fresh with someone else. Start fresh with the person you love, it just isn't working with. Either way, you're going to need to start fresh. If you want to learn more about this, go to my website, richinrelationship.com. If you're in any of these stages and you want some resources, we have some great resources at richinrelationship.com, particularly if you're in stage 4 or stage 5 or stage 6. There are some great tools that'll help you before you really withdraw, tools that'll help you communicate. If you're not sure where you are and you want to have a better understanding, reach out to me at richinrelationships.com. Get yourself a free 30-minute consult. I'm happy to talk to you and get to know you. If you have questions about this, email me. You can contact me through the website. Rich@richinrelationship is my email. Or comment on this video or podcast, wherever you're experiencing this. If this has been helpful and nurturing, share it with your partner. Share it with your friends, share it on social media, subscribe, like us, help us grow Rich in Relationships so that we can help more and more people. The more people subscribe, the more people we can reach and help with this information. And so help other people by subscribing and liking what we're giving you. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful tomorrow.